I'd been sitting in the corner of the coffee shop for nearly 20 minutes before I noticed her. Same table she always took on Tuesdays, next to the big window where the sun cut in and warmed the wood grain. I'd seen her a few times before, never long enough to do more than glance. But today she looked straight at me when I walked in, like she'd been waiting. I ordered my usual, black coffee, no sugar, and the barista smiled without asking. That's how often I came here now. A routine I'd built since moving back into town, since my phone had gone quiet at night. Most mornings I left the coffee to cool before I touched it. Today, I found myself stirring it even though there was nothing in it to stir. She was older than me, mid-40s, maybe a little more, but she wore it lightly. Her hair was pinned up, a few strands falling out at the back of her neck. A leather notebook sat open beside her mug, a pen balanced across the middle. When she looked down at it, she bit her lip like she was holding back a thought. I kept my eyes on the window. She shifted. I saw her hand hover over the mug before she wrapped both palms around it, like she was cold. Then, without looking, she said, "You always sit in that corner." Her voice was low, not unfriendly. I glanced up. "Habit," I said too quickly. She smiled. Not a big one, just a crease at the edge of her mouth. "Comforting to see someone else's habits," she murmured, and went back to her notebook. I folded the napkin under my cup until it looked like a small square. Unfolded it. Folded it again. Outside, a delivery truck hissed to a stop. I thought about sending a text to nobody in particular, just to feel the vibration in my palm. Didn't. A few minutes later, she spoke again. "Black coffee. No sugar." She wasn't asking. That obvious? I tried to sound amused. "You look like someone who doesn't like things cluttered," she said, eyes still on her notes. I laughed softly, but it came out more like a sigh. "And you look like someone who writes down everything she's not saying." That made her look at me. Really look. Her pen stopped moving. For a second I thought she might answer, but instead she closed the notebook and pushed it aside. "Maybe," she said. We didn't talk after that. The silence wasn't heavy, just wide enough to notice. She traced the rim of her mug with her finger. I watched the steam drift off my coffee and disappear. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, then stopped. I didn't check it. When she finally stood to leave, she hesitated by my table. "Tuesdays," she said. "You're always here." "Most days," I corrected. My voice came out softer than I meant. She nodded like that was enough. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out a slip of paper, and set it next to my folded napkin. "For when you're tired of sitting alone," she said quietly. No smile this time. I watched her walk out into the bright afternoon, coat over her arm. The paper stayed where she'd left it, upside down. My hands stayed flat on the table. For a long moment, I didn't move. The coffee had gone cold. Outside, she crossed the street without looking back. I turned the paper over. It wasn't a phone number, just a line in neat handwriting. "You don't have to keep waiting." I didn't call her. I kept the slip of paper folded in my wallet for 3 days, like it might change shape if I waited long enough. On the 4th day, a drizzle came in off the lake, and the shop felt too small. I walked instead, ended up outside the old brick house with the green shutters. Her house. She'd written the address under that single line, so neatly I almost missed it. I told myself I was just returning a favor. She'd offered tea the other day, and I could pretend I was taking her up on it. My stomach didn't believe me. She opened the door before I could knock twice. No notebook today, no pin in her hair. It fell loose around her face. She looked surprised, but not unkind. "You came," she said, voice softer than the rain behind me. "You wrote," I answered. My hand was still on the railing. Inside smelled faintly of cardamom. She motioned me toward the kitchen without fuss, like this was normal. "Tea?" she asked. I nodded. She filled a kettle, her movements unhurried. I noticed a photograph stuck under a magnet on the fridge, her with 2 younger men at a barbecue, one of them with his arm draped across her shoulders. Something tightened in my chest. "That's my husband's best friend," she said, noticing my glance. "From a long time ago." She smiled in a way that wasn't quite a smile. "My husband's gone now. Divorce." Years. Oh, I said too low. Steam began to rise from the kettle. I fiddled with the cuff of my sleeve. She poured the tea into heavy mugs, slid one toward me. And you? You always look like you're on the verge of leaving somewhere. I thought about lying. Instead, I said, breakup. 6 months ago. We'd been together 5 years. My voice felt raw coming out. We sat at the small table. Rain ticked against the window. She wrapped her hands around her mug the way she had in the cafe. I'm sorry, she said. I shrugged. It's quieter now. Not always in a good way. She looked at me then, eyes steady. Quiet can be a relief. Or a punishment. She sipped her tea. Sometimes both. I didn't know what to do with my hands, so I turned my mug in slow circles, watching the liquid swirl. We stayed like that a while, saying little. The kind of silence that made my heart race. I used to come here with him, she said finally. Your age, actually. He was your age when we met. She let out a small breath. Strange how years rearrange people. I stared at her fingers curled around the mug, pale where the pressure was. And now you're here, I said, more to myself than to her. She tilted her head. And now you're here, she echoed, almost a whisper. I imagined the barista noticing I hadn't shown up today. I imagined her friends seeing me in this kitchen, the questions they'd ask. I imagined nothing at all, just the sound of rain and the warmth of her across from me. She stood and went to the window. The gutter leaks, she said, pointing. Been meaning to fix it. I can look at it, I heard myself say. If you want. She smiled at the glass, not at me. You don't have to. I know. For a long moment she stayed there. Then she turned back, crossed the room slowly, and set her hand flat on the table between us. Not reaching, just resting. The gesture was small, but the air changed. I reached out and turned her mug so the handle faced her again. My fingers brushed the back of her hand, barely. Neither of us moved away. I don't know why this moment stayed with me, I thought. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. But I didn't say it out loud. She withdrew her hand, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Tuesday again next week? She asked, as if the cafe were still our ground. Maybe sooner, I said. My voice had a tremor I couldn't hide. Her eyes lifted to mine, a quiet question in them. Then she laughed once, very softly, and handed me a spoon to stir a tea that didn't need stirring. It was nothing, just a spoon. But it felt like permission. The next Tuesday, she wasn't at the cafe. Her table by the window sat empty, notebook gone. I lingered anyway, watching the door, telling myself I had work to do. My coffee went cold before I touched it. 2 days later, a note slid under my apartment door in her handwriting. Need help with the gutter. If you still want to. No greeting, no signature. By the time I knocked at her house, the rain had stopped. She opened the door with a half smile, hair tied back, sleeves rolled. Didn't think you'd come, she said. I almost didn't, I admitted. My voice came out thin. She led me out to the backyard. The ladder was already propped against the side of the house. Leaves clogged the downspout. I climbed while she steadied the base, her hands wrapped around the metal. The closeness felt different out here. No table between us, no mugs. Halfway up, I heard a voice over the fence. A young man, maybe my age, calling her name. I glanced down. She stiffened. It's my son, she said quickly. Home early. I froze. She tilted her head up at me, eyes warning, soft but firm. Keep going, she whispered. He appeared a second later, taller than me, college hoodie on. He eyed me, then her. Who's this? Neighbor, she said without looking at him. Helping with the gutter. He didn't push, just nodded and went inside. The screen door snapped shut. Only then did she exhale, one hand leaving the ladder. You didn't tell me, I murmured. I didn't think it mattered, she said. Her hands stayed on the ladder, but her gaze drifted to the grass. Maybe it does. I came down slowly. We stood a foot apart. She brushed dirt from her palms, not looking at me. I could smell the tea she'd left steeping inside. I should go, I said. You don't have to. Barely above a whisper. Silence spread between us, wide and thin. She reached for a leaf on my shoulder, flicked it away, fingers grazing the back of my neck. Quick, almost accidental. My chest tightened. Your son, I started. He doesn't know, she said. We were still so close. I saw the small tremor in her jaw, the way her eyes flicked down, then up again. My own hands hovered, unsure where to land. For a second, everything narrowed. The ladder, the smell of rain on wood, her breath. If I leaned an inch forward, she stepped back. The tea's overbrewed, she said lightly, like nothing had happened. Turned toward the house. I stood in the yard, heartbeat in my ears, watching her walk away. We hadn't crossed the line. Not yet. But I could still feel where her fingers had touched my skin, and it was already dark when she texted. Walk. No explanation. Just that word. I left my laptop open on the counter and went. She was waiting at the edge of the park, coat buttoned high, hands buried in her pockets. Street lamps threw soft cones of light onto the path. I hadn't seen her since the gutter. Every day since then felt like holding my breath. You're late, she said, but her voice had no edge. I almost didn't come, I said. We started walking. Damp leaves underfoot, a faint smell of earth. She matched my pace without looking at me. You've been avoiding the cafe, she said after a while. You weren't there, I said. A small sound came from her throat, half a laugh, half a sigh. My son's home for a while. Changes the rhythm. I noticed, I said quietly. The day of the gutter. She stopped, then kept walking. He thinks you're a neighbor. That's safer. We passed a bench under a street lamp. She sat. I stayed standing a moment, then sat too, a careful distance away. Our knees almost touched. You're young, she said suddenly. Too young for this. I stared at the gravel. You don't know what I'm for, I said, more sharply than I meant. She flinched at that, then smiled without humor. No, I don't. Silence again. She pulled a glove off and rubbed at her temple. Her hand trembled slightly. I shouldn't have asked you here, she murmured. Why did you? I don't know. She exhaled, long and slow. You remind me of a time before everything got sorted. Before I made the rules I live by now. I watched her profile, the soft light catching on her hair. You make it sound like you're already gone. Maybe I am. Her voice caught. Do you have any idea what this looks like? Me. You. I folded my hands, pressed my thumbs together until it hurt. I think about it all the time. She turned her head toward me, eyes narrowing like she wanted to read my mind. And what do you see? She asked. I almost told her. How I pictured knocking on her door late at night. How I imagined her hand finding mine. How I thought about the slip of paper still in my wallet. Instead I said, I see us sitting here, not saying the thing we're thinking. Her lips parted. She looked away, then back. I'm afraid, she said softly. Of me. Of myself. A dry laugh. Of wanting something I shouldn't want. I swallowed. The park felt too quiet. Somewhere a dog barked and then stopped. I could smell her perfume under the damp air, faint and warm. She shifted on the bench, leaned forward, elbows on her knees. When my husband left, his best friend tried to comfort me. It was messy. I swore never again. No blurred lines. No almost. She glanced at me. And now you. My throat tightened. I'm not him. I know. She looked down at her bare hand. That's why it's worse. A pause. I reached out, not touching her, just letting my hand hover near her wrist. I keep thinking, maybe we're both just lonely. Maybe. Her voice broke on the word. She stayed bent forward, eyes on the ground, her shoulders rising and falling. Then she sat back slowly, turned toward me. Our faces were suddenly close enough to feel each other's breath. For a heartbeat, everything inside me leaned forward. Her eyes flicked to my mouth and back. My fingers brushed the bench between us. She whispered, Don't. I stopped. We stayed there, still as statues, our breath clouding in the cold air. She looked down again, then up. What are we doing? She asked, not angry, not even truly asking, just letting the question hang there. The street lamp buzzed once and went quiet. I stared at the ground, every nerve awake. Her hand lay open on the bench between us, palm up, inches from mine. Neither of us moved. For a week after the park bench, Nothing. No texts. No Tuesday. The cafe felt like a stage after the play had ended. Chairs still there, lights still on, but nobody moving. I kept showing up anyway. Same corner, same black coffee cooling in front of me. On the third day, the barista asked if I wanted the usual, and I almost said no. Instead, I just nodded, though my hands were shaking. I thought about knocking on her door, but the image of her son's eyes on me stopped me cold. On the fourth night, my phone lit up. Can't meet. Complicated right now. That was all. No punctuation. I stared at it until the screen went dark. By the weekend, I walked past her house. Curtains drawn. Porch light off. The ladder still leaned against the siding, half shifted from where we'd left it. Something about that, the ladder still there, made my chest tighten, like we'd left a sentence unfinished. I thought about the stories she'd hinted at, her husband's best friend, the messy comfort, the rules she'd made. But she'd never told me the whole thing, and I'd never asked about the man in the photo with his arm around her shoulders. Husband or best friend? Was there a difference in her mind anymore? On Monday, when I finally saw her again, it wasn't in the cafe. She was across the street with her son, carrying grocery bags. She laughed at something he said, a sound I hadn't heard before. Lighter, almost carefree. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and chose not to. I turned away before they reached the corner. Walked back to my apartment. Sat down at my kitchen table and stared at my phone. Later that night, she sent another message. Sorry about today. Trying to sort things. You should too. I typed, sort what? But didn't send it. Deleted it. Typed again, I miss you. Didn't send that either. Locked the phone, set it face down. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. By Wednesday, my routine had inverted. I skipped the cafe. Stayed late at work. Ate dinner standing at the counter. I caught myself glancing at the door like she might walk in, even though she had no reason to. Once, late at night, I drafted a message asking if I could still fix the gutter. I stared at the blinking cursor, imagining her reading it, imagining nothing at all. The words blurred. I deleted them. I started walking at dusk, the route we'd taken through the park. The bench was empty. Damp leaves again underfoot, but the street lamp had burned out completely now. Without the light, the space looked smaller. One evening, as I passed her street, I saw her front door ajar. A man stood in the doorway, back to me, older than me, but younger than her husband would be now. He said something I couldn't hear. She appeared behind him, touching his arm lightly. She closed the door. The porch light flicked on. I stood there for a long moment, half in shadow. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A new message from her. Please don't come by for a while. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. I wanted to, but my hands stayed still. The screen went dark. Back at the cafe the next morning, my corner table was taken. A student sat there, laptop open, earbuds in. I ordered anyway, but the barista didn't recognize me at first. For here, she asked. I took the coffee to a different seat near the door. The window showed the street, but not her. The napkin I folded stayed flat this time. When I left, I paused on the sidewalk, thumb hovering over her contact name. I could have knocked. I could have sent the message. I didn't. The ladder still leaned against her house in my mind. Wet leaves clinging to the steps. It was raining again the night I finally went back. Not the soft drizzle from before, heavier now, with water pooling along the curb. I stood under the awning across the street, watching her porch light blink on and off like it was thinking about staying lit. I almost turned around. Then I saw the ladder, still leaning where we'd left it, wet leaves clinging to the rungs. Something about that felt like an invitation no one had actually given. I crossed the street and climbed her steps. My knock was soft, more like a question. A moment later, she opened the door. She looked tired, hair loose, sweater hanging off one shoulder. No makeup. Her eyes widened just a little. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know. My voice was steadier than I expected. She stepped aside anyway. Come in. Before you drown. Inside smelled like tea again, though nothing was brewing. The kitchen light was low, a single bulb over the sink. We stood there, damp and awkward. I'm not alone, she said quickly, almost rehearsed. My son's upstairs. He's sleeping. I'm not here for, I stopped. I just needed to talk. She rubbed her hands together, looking at the floor. I thought we'd already said everything. We didn't, I said. We keep stopping right before. Her mouth tightened. Because stopping is safer. I took a step closer, but left space between us. Do you want me to leave? She didn't answer. Just went to the counter, picked up a dish towel, and folded it once, then again. Her hands trembled. You're young, she said, not looking up. You have a whole life. You don't need. She cut herself off. I'm not a mistake you're about to make, I said. I'm a person sitting in your kitchen. That made her lift her head. Her eyes were wet, but not crying. Then say what you came to say, she whispered. I exhaled, felt the words snag in my throat. I like being with you. More than I should. I think about you when I'm not here. But I don't want to be a shadow in your life. Her lips parted. She pressed the towel to her chest like a shield. You think I don't feel it too? Do you? My voice cracked on the second word. She let the towel drop onto the counter. Every time I see you, she said. It scares me. We stood in the small kitchen, rain tapping at the window, the refrigerator humming. I could hear my heart in my ears. She took a step toward me, close enough that I could see the faint line of a scar on her jaw. She raised a hand, then stopped, fingers hovering near my arm. I don't want to ruin you, she said softly. You won't, I said. But if we keep pretending this is nothing, we'll ruin ourselves. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Her hand fell back to her side. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, then opened them again. We can't be what you think we can, she said. I can't. Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. But I also can't go back to not knowing you. I felt something in me loosen. I stepped closer until our shoulders almost touched. Then tell me what we are. She gave a small, strangled laugh. Two people sitting in a kitchen at midnight, she said, trying to be honest. I nodded. Okay. She reached for my hand, not in a rush, just slid her fingers over mine and held on. Warm, damp from the rain. No kiss. No promise. Just the weight of her hand on mine. For a long time we stayed like that, silent. The rain eased. Somewhere upstairs the floor creaked, her son turning over in his sleep. We both heard it, both stayed still. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost a breath. Thank you for coming. I squeezed her hand once, gentle. Thank you for letting me. She smiled, small, tired, real. We let go at the same time. Winter faded without announcement. One day there was frost on the park bench. The next there were soft buds on the trees. In that in-between time, our lives bent quietly toward each other without anyone naming it. We didn't start living together, not exactly. I still had my small apartment 2 streets over. She still had her house with the green shutters and the ladder leaning against the siding. But Tuesday mornings became ours again. We met at the cafe at 8:47 a.m., like a secret we didn't have to keep. Black coffee for me, tea for her. She still wrapped her palms around the mug, and I still stirred mine even though there was nothing to stir. No one stared. We just fit into the background like regulars. Her son stayed at school more often now, and when he did come home, she introduced me properly. No neighbor story, no hiding. I fixed the gutter, finally, on a clear Sunday while he held the ladder and she handed up tools. We didn't talk about what we were, only what needed doing. It felt, strangely, like a kind of honesty. Some evenings I cooked in her kitchen. She worked at the table, tapping numbers into her laptop, hair falling loose as it always did. Sometimes she reached over absent-mindedly and straightened the napkin under my plate. Those small touches meant more than any speech. On a warm April morning, we walked back through the park. The street lamp above the bench had been replaced. The new bulb gave off a steady glow. We sat there again, shoulders almost touching, the same as months before, but also completely different. Neither of us felt like running. I used to come here after work, she said, before everything fell apart. It always felt like a waiting room. And now? I asked. She smiled a little. Now it feels like a place you stop, not a place you wait. We watched a dog chase a stick across the damp grass. I remembered how she had once whispered "don't" on this same bench. Now she just sat quietly, hands in her coat pockets, breathing in time with me. No declarations, just earned closeness. At 8:47 a.m. a week later, the cafe was crowded. We stood in line, shoulder to shoulder. The barista didn't even ask our orders anymore. She just set a black coffee and a cardamom tea on the counter. We carried them to our usual table. She opened her leather notebook, a new one now, edges unbent, and slid it between us so I could see what she was scribbling. On the page she had written, "Nothing waiting, just living." I traced the words with my finger. She closed the notebook softly and placed her hand over mine. Not dramatic, not hidden, just there. I thought of the ladder, the porch light, the first slip of paper she'd given me with that line. "You don't have to keep waiting." Months later, it finally made sense. We weren't waiting anymore. We were simply showing up. She looked at me then, eyes steady, a small crease at the corner of her mouth. "Ready?" she asked. It wasn't about coffee or the day ahead. It was just our word now. I nodded. "Ready." We left the cafe together, cups in hand, the morning bright but soft. The city felt like it had slowed down just enough for us to walk through it. Later, as we crossed the street toward the park, she glanced back at the bench and then at me. "You know," she said quietly, "someday someone else will sit there and wonder what it means." I squeezed her hand once. "They'll figure it out," I said. We didn't need more than that. The rest of the sentence hung in the air between us, unfinished but whole.